Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Today we start with a new unit under Indian economics, and the name of the unit is India's experience with urbanization and migration. India's experience with urbanization and migration. Now, there are many things that we need to understand under this topic, India's experience with urbanization and migration. And the following topics are what we are going to cover. First of all, we will cover the different types of migratory flows. So we will try to understand what is migration, what are the different kind of migratory flows that we have. Uh, what happens when migration takes place from one state to another? What is that called? What happens when migration takes place from one country to another country? What is that called? So we will talk about the different kind of migrations, right? Then we will talk about another very important thing, which is impact of migration on economies. How does migration affect economies? कैसे migration economies को affect करता है? That is also we will go ahead and try to understand that. And how is that dependent on the origin and destination of migration? So we want to understand कि migration कहाँ से originate हुई है? Where does migration origin from? And where migration is destined from? कहाँ migration हो रही है? How is it going to impact those economies? उस economy पे क्या फर्क पड़ेगा जहां से migration हो रही है? So during the time of independence of India, there was a concept of not even independence, much before independence, there was a concept called drain of wealth, right? And drain of wealth was actually based on the concept of migration, right? So we are going to go ahead and understand how the economy is affected where migration is originated, jahan se migration origin ho rahi hai, and how economy is affected where the migration is destined, jahan migration ho rahi hai wo wala economy kaise affect hoga. We're also going to talk about third, the process of growth of urban settlements. So when people migrate from the rural to the urban region within the country, how that urban settlement takes place and how growth takes place in that aspect, we will also talk about that. At last, we will talk about urban development strategies. Right, beta? We will talk about the urban development strategies. So this is the aim of this unit. In this unit, predominantly, we are going to go ahead and we are going to talk about migration. We are going to talk about how migration takes place. What is the origin of migration? What is the destination of migration? Right? How can we go ahead and how can we ensure that urban settlement has taken place and urban development strategies? What are those strategies for different countries, especially in aspect to India? Right, beta? तो इसके बारे में हम पूरे में बात करने वाले. Right. Now, first of all, I want to ask अ बेसिक क्वेश्चन, सबसे इंपॉर्टेंट और बेसिक क्वेश्चन की हम बात करेंगे, व्हाट इज माइग्रेशन? माइग्रेशन है क्या? वी आर गोइंग टू गो अहेड एंड आंसर दिस क्वेश्चन, राइट बेटा? So migration can be defined basically as movement of people, right? Word itself says movement of people, geographical movement of people from their residence to any other place. मतलब अगर if my residence is in Delhi, अगर मैं दिल्ली की हूँ, so whenever I go from Delhi to any other place, that will be called as migration. Migration can be temporary or it can be long run, right? So when I talk about temporary migration means it can be like for 1 month, my company requires me to work in Bangalore, work out of Bangalore or work out of Calcutta, right? That is temporary, right? Long run means permanently I have shifted to Bangalore. I have made a house in Bangalore. I am working in Bangalore forever now. Delhi is no more my residence. So migration can be temporary or long run. Migration can be short distant to long distant. Short distant means it is for a short period of time. Mane ki, for example, let us go ahead and say that I'm just going from, say, earlier I used to live in Delhi. Now I live in Gurgaon. So this is a short distant, migration. It can be long distant also. Earlier I was living in India. Now I live in Canada. It is a long distant migration, right? It can be internal or international. Internal means within the national boundaries. International means across the international boundaries, right? So let us write down what is migration, beta. You will write it with me. So please write down migration is defined as geographical movement of people involving change from their usual place of residence. So change of residence from their usual place of residence. So when people change their residence, जहां पे वो आज तक रह रहे थे, उस जगह को चेंज करके वो किसी नई जगह पे शिफ्ट होते हैं, when they shift their residence, that is basically what is migration, right? So please write down migration can be distinguished on the basis of so we can go ahead and we can distinguish the different kind of migration. हम अलग अलग migration को distinguish कर सकते हैं. The first one can be beta temporary versus permanent. क्या आप कुछ टाइम के लिए शिफ्ट हो रहे हो या परमानेंटली शिफ्ट हो रहे हो? The second can be short versus long distance. The third can be internal versus external. Internal versus external. So these can be the different kind of migrations, right, that we have. Now, beta, just try to understand. When I talk about internal, please understand that this is within national boundaries. And external is across international boundaries. Across international markets, right? Okay. Now, let us go ahead and try to understand the sociological significance of migration. Please write down. Sociological significance of migration. Okay. See, there are three main components of population change. Population तीन वजह से बदल सकती है. The first one is mortality, birth. Huh? The first one is mortality, right? That means we want to talk about deaths. The second one is fertility. That means we want to talk about birth. And the third one is population because of migration, when people move in or out of the city. So we can go ahead and say that there are three main reasons of population change. Three reasons are there why population can actually go ahead and change. The first one is mortality. The second one is fertility. And the third one is migration. Right, beta? Now, migration is different from the other two processes, right? Because in migration, there is no biological framework involved. Matlab, when mortality, death, or birth takes place, we have a biological framework involved in it, right? Of course, it is getting impacted by social, cultural, and economic factors also. Matlab, fertility, whether you will have one child or whether you will have five children in your house, will depend on which social culture you, which society you belong to, which culture you come from, right? Whether you are rich enough to give good education to five children or only to one child, right? So, of course, mortality and fertility, they are influenced by other factors also. बाकी factors भी इनको impact करेंगे. Social factors, आप किस society से belong करते हो, cultural factors, किस culture को follow करते हो, economic factors, आपके पास कितना पैसा है, all of that will impact these two things, but they are mainly impacted by biological factors also. So biological factor also goes ahead and plays a role in it. Okay. And apart from biological factor, as I told you, you have socio, cultural, economic factors, etc. You have these factors as well, right? Now, when we talk about migration, on the other hand, migration is basically based on the wish of people. In case of migration, there is no biological component involved, right? This is a deliberate movement by people. अगर मैं चाहूंगी तभी तो मैं दूसरी city या दूसरे state में shift करूंगी, right? So when I talk about migration, migration is a deliberate move by people, right? And because of migration, basically migration goes ahead and it impacts one, the population structure of an economy or area. So imagine that if all people who want to work in industries migrate to my city, accordingly the population structure of my city will be defined. Huh? Accordingly, the characteristic of my city or my area or my country will be defined, right? So the labor force, and I can say the labor force characteristics are basically determined through migration, right? So therefore, I can go ahead and say that this implies that migration, it is a symptom or it brings social change in the society. Migration brings social change in society. It brings social change in society. Am I clear? Because the way that society will be determined, will be defined, it will depend on what kind of what kind of migration has taken place in your society, right? Okay. Now, always remember that whenever you read any of such chapter, you need to go ahead and you need to give definitions according to people, right? So according to some known people, you should be quoting the definitions in their language, right? And if we go ahead and if we talk about the so migration का मतलब तो हमें clear है that it is movement of people from one place to another. But if I talk about the definition according to demographic dictionary, then according to, I'm going to quote this, so it is going to be in double quotes. According to demographic dictionary, the definition of migration is that migration is a form of geographical mobility between one geographical unit and another, where people change their residence. बोल सेम ही चीज रहे हैं, but we are quoting it in exact words of the dictionary. So please write down, migration is a form of geographical mobility or spatial movement. Spatial means moving across space, moving from one region to another. Between one geographical unit and another, generally involving a change of residence from the place of origin or place of departure to the place of destination or place of arrival. Right? So what are we saying here? We are saying that, look, the place from where migration starts, that is called as the place of origin, and where it ends, that becomes the place of destination. Or because you're departing from that place, आप उस place से जा रहे हो. Have you seen airports? It says departure, arrival. Arrival मतलब जहां पहुंच रहे हो. Departure मतलब जहां से जा रहे हो. So this can also be known as the place of departure, and this can be known as the place of arrival. Right? Now, there was this famous, well-known demographer called as Everett, and Everett Lee. He basically defined migration as permanent or semi-permanent change of residence. Okay. So we had Everett Lee, and he defined migration as permanent or semi-permanent change of residence. Permanent or semi-permanent change of residence. Am I clear with this aspect, beta? Okay. Now, you know, different studies have been done on migration, and different people have called migration as different things. But just remember that when you do a holiday trip, right? जैसे for example, if I go ahead and I say कि अच्छा ठीक है, एक महीने के लिए I am on a Europe trip, then that will not be part of migration. उसको हम migration नहीं बोलेंगे. That won't be called as migration. So holiday trips or sailor's occupation are not included in migration. They are not they are not migration per se. उनको हम migration नहीं बोलते. So I hope this part is absolutely clear to you. So today the aim was to go ahead, and in this lecture I wanted to explain to you what is migration. Now in the next lecture we will be going ahead and we will be talking about the different forms of migration कि अलग-अलग तरीके के migration होते कौन से हैं. We will take that in the next class, right beta? Okay, thank you.